welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. In this segment of the video, we're going to send you through a fascinating exchange with Christians and what a horrible mess we actually put them into. And it's quite tragic that, I actually really felt sorry for the Christians in the room. And we'll show you in this video an example of exactly what we're talking about. Now, if you notice, there's a Facebook page called Apologetics Academy, as you can see there. And that Facebook group is run by a Christian apologist named Jonathan McLatchley. Now, a post was posted below that by Stefan van Oosgen, and it's regards to Takiya, deception and lying in Islam. As you know, the Christian missionaries put this argument forward that Islam is about lies and deception, but we all know what Takiya actually means. The Quran and the Hadith clearly do not permit lying under any circumstances. However, there are certain circumstances that you can lie if your life is in danger and so forth. But of course, they don't want to understand that concept, right? They just want to portray, no, Islam lies, full stop. But what we did was we used the Bible against them and showed where Jesus himself prescribed the lying of his disciples. He allowed them to lie in certain situations. My God, did this conversation bring the whole room to its knees. Christians were so upset about this. He started actually calling me a moron in the text. They used personal insults and slandering, even though I kept my manners through the whole conversation. Now, it's really interesting because even a Christian by the name of Helen Wancombe actually admitted that a Christian can lie if their life is in danger. Have a look at this. They write, "I was misunderstanding you, but we're good now." They write also, "It is not wrong for a Christian to lie to save a life." They go on to say, "If someone comes in my front door with a gun and demands I tell him if I have children, you bet I'm going to lie. I can lie to save my children from being sinned against." So this is the confession by Helen. This is a Christian apologist again on the apologetic website of Jonathan McLatchley. As for the biblical verse where Jesus commanded the lies, it's in Mark 8:29-30. So let's read it from Bible Gateway. Here it is. We'll read from Mark 8:27-31, New International Version. That's from Bible Gateway. Let's read from verse 27. This is where Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah. So verse 27 reads, "Jesus and his disciples went on to the village around Caesarea Philippi. On the way he asked them, 'Who do people say I am?' They replied, 'Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets.' 'But what about you?' he asked. 'Who do you say I am?' He's asking this question to Peter. Peter answered, 'You are the Messiah.' Then Jesus says, and watch how Jesus teaches him a lie here in verse 30. He says, Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Did you notice that? Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Now, some Christians are saying, well, that's not really a lie. Jesus is basically wanting Peter to conceal that they had a discussion with Jesus and that Jesus didn't want anyone to know that he was the Messiah just yet. So we came up with a scenario, and the scenario is as follows. Suppose some Romans or Jews cornered Peter and said, "Look, we saw you talk with that man, and, who is that man that you were talking to? Was that Jesus, a prophet? Was he a Messiah? Who was he?" Now, Peter would have to conceal who that man was. And if they hypothetically asked, is that the Messiah? We want a yes or no answer from you. Then Peter can't say, yes, he's the Messiah and tell the truth. He has to say, no, he's not the Messiah, right? So if he was put under stress, under questioning, then he would have to follow Jesus when Jesus said and warned, do not tell anyone about him that he's the Messiah. So Jesus may not have told Peter not to say a lie indirectly. However, Jesus did put the disciples in a situation where if they were under pressure to express the truth or to lie, then the disciples would have to opt out to deception and lies. No, he isn't the Messiah. So if the Romans or the Jews came and questioned him and said, is that the Messiah? He would have to say, no, that's not the Messiah. So that's clearly a lie right there. He encouraged a lie. Although he encouraged concealment, but that concealment still puts the disciple in a position where he ought to have made a lie if he fell into such a scenario and a situation. That, my friend, is a perfect example of Takiya. Now, interestingly, even the father of Christianity, which is Paul, he actually compromised on lying too. If you read in Philippians 1:18, he compromises again those calling to Christ in deception. When reading the context, it seems as though Paul is objecting to those who preach through deception. But still, at the end of the day, he compromises and says at least they are still preaching towards Christ. In fact, it gets much worse for Paul because even he himself used the same deception way of preaching when we read 1 Corinthians 9:20, where Paul claimed he was a Jew to win for Christ, though he was not really part of them. In fact, it gets worse upon Paul's character. He uses the term beguile, trickery, to catch out disciples. This is in 2 Corinthians 12:16. So he uses things like trickery to catch people out, and trickery is part of lying and deception. So even Paul, the founder of Christianity or the father of Christianity, he practices Takiya in the Bible. Now, to my question, a person called Valdemar da Cruz, he's Portuguese, he calls out and he says, hey moron, you see in the Bible commandments not to lie, especially by Jesus, you must be dreaming about it. So do you notice the slander already, calling me a moron shows the spirit of this Christian. He continues and says, in Mark 8:30, Jesus don't say to lie, but to not say anything about him. Once they revealed to Jesus in Mark 8:29. So basically he's saying, Jesus prescribed not to tell or say anything. But my reply to him was, what are the things you're not supposed to say about him? That is, you're not to tell anyone you met Jesus who was the actual Messiah. That is condoning lies. So I see how you've resorted to insults. Vladimir writes back and says, Mustafa, you are really a moron, my friend. If the Bible condemns lie, why you understand the verse to lie deliberately? In the continuation, you can see the intention is not lying, but hide or avoid to tell anyone what they know, because nobody knows yet he's the Christ. This is basically what he's saying. I said to him that I've already responded to this, and I said to him, suppose Romans came out and asked those disciples, who was it that you guys were talking to? Because we believe it was the Messiah. Their concealment would ought to include a lie. No, it wasn't the Messiah. it's clear Jesus taught a form of Takiya. If you wish to hurl insults, it's okay. I get a lot of that from the followers of the Shimonians. He comes back and says, no, my friend, you don't understand the context and so forth, right? And I said to him, I understand the context clearly. Jesus may not directly taught them to lie. However, he did put his disciples in a position where they couldn't tell the truth to a questioner who asked about him. The verse is clear. He then writes back, this is a Christian, Vladimir, he writes back and says, you really are convinced about this. Okay, go to the dictionary and see what it means to lie and Takiya. And I said to him, well, Christians can't give a convincing argument for me to think otherwise. Jesus approved Takiya if the disciples were being pressured on revealing whom they were talking to. Vladimir then writes back and says, but that's the point. He does not say for saying nothing if they are being in that position. That's it. What you suppose but sounds ridiculous because you guys put words and meanings where don't exist. And I basically said to him, putting words in the text, no, we are coming up with a scenario that could face the disciples. Therefore, we are questioning such a situation if it were to occur. And thus, we are showing if such of a situation did occur, then they would have to fulfill a Takiya. There is no way out of it unless they wished to break the oath to Jesus and reveal his true identity. Now, it's funny because my arguments and my responses really put the Christians under me. Vladimir de Cruz, what he did was he re-uploaded my arguments on the Apologetics Academy website, as you can see here. And interestingly, in the comments section, he went into a debate with another Christian called Helen Wancombe upon this very same topic, who is supposed to be another Christian. And Vladimir, because he couldn't beat my arguments and my responses, he actually sought counsel from another Christian called Helen Wancombe. And as you can see, they go into a complete dialogue between each other. And they're actually talking about me and they're talking about the arguments. And Helen is basically trying to educate and teach Vladimir on how to make responses. But the interesting thing is, they actually both got into an argument themselves about the very same topic where Helen was actually justifying that you can lie according to the Bible. And he brings up the argument in the Bible where a person called Rahab lied. And she did it to save lives. This is in the Bible, right? And they started having a conflict between Vladimir de Cruz. So what happened was this Christian tried to come and debate me and he got refuted. He went and started seeking counsel of Helen, where Helen actually started refuting Vladimir. So instead of Helen teaching Vladimir about how to debate and make responses back to me, they actually started fighting amongst themselves that, yes, you can lie according to the Bible, where even Rahab lied in order to save a life. As you can see, Helen Wancombe says to Vladimir, he says, well, I'm sorry, but I have to disagree with Vladimir because Rahab lied and she did it to save a life. You can see it in the screenshot right there. In fact, Helen even goes and says, also, it is not wrong for a Christian to lie to save a life. If someone comes in my front door with a gun, demands I tell him if I have children, you bet I'm going to lie, right? So Vladimir went to Helen to seek help and answers and responses, and Helen slapped Vladimir in the face and said, there are lies and you can make lies to save one's life and so forth. And he used evidences through the Bible. So it's amazing, It's amazing how the guy came to debate me and now he started to debate his own Christian folks who actually agree with me to an extent. See in the screen, this is where the question and answer starts, where Vladimir writes to Helen and says, yeah, but the main motive that Mustafa Muhammad Sain claims in this passage from Mark 8:29 is to find Jesus doing the same thing as asking the disciples to lie. So as you can see, he's actually asking Helen's counsel and responses, and Helen slaps Vladimir in the face and says, no, you can lie in certain situations and so forth. So there you have it. So the conclusion will always be this: Jesus commanded his disciples not to tell anyone that he is the Messiah. And if the disciples were put in a position on a yes or no answer from a Roman, a Jew, a pagan, or whatever, asking whether, since you've met Jesus, is he the Messiah, that disciple has to conceal it and say no. If he had to have a yes or a no answer, he had to say no. If he said yes, then he's breaking the promise to Jesus, because Jesus said, do not tell anyone about this. So if a disciple was put into a yes or no corner, then he ought to have lied. So yes, Jesus put the disciple in a position where he had to express Takiya, period. Goodbye.